Hello friends, hope you all are doing fine. In this video, let's try to understand how the process of natural selection shapes evolution. To understand this, we first need to know what evolutionary change is and what it is not. So what is evolutionary change? So evolutionary change is a cumulative change in heritable characters of populations or organisms over multiple generations. Note that according to this definition, changes that occur during an individual's lifetime are not evolutionary changes. For example, Sachin has gained weight and has become angrier over the years. Change in Sachin's behavior and his weight happened during his lifetime, and therefore it is not an evolutionary change. Change that occurs in individual's lifespan is not evolutionary change. Then what kind of change is an evolutionary change? Evolutionary change is a gradual change, and most importantly, it's a change that takes place over many generations. Thus, when we refer to evolution, we are talking about changes in characters that are inherited from parents and passed on to offspring. Let's understand what evolutionary change is with the help of an example. Look at the group of beetles in this picture. There are two types of beetles, green and brown. Let's say that there is a gene which determines beetle color expression. Since genes are responsible for the expression of color, the color is heritable. That is, beetle color can pass from parents to offspring. Let's assume that in the first generation, green beetles are very common, say 90% of population, and brown beetles are rare, say only 10% of population. It was observed that the proportion of green to brown beetles has changed after several generations. It was observed that brown beetles percentage has increased and green beetle percentage has decreased if compared with the first generation. Now there are 60% brown beetles and 40% green beetles. In this example, the proportion of green to brown beetles in population has changed over multiple generations. This is an example of evolutionary change because here the composition of color, which is a heritable character, has changed over many generations. Now the question arises, how does the gradual change in heritable characters takes place over multiple generations? So there are many ways by which such a change can happen. Natural selection is very important way to bring in change in organisms and populations over many generations. So let's understand what is natural selection and let's focus on that. Living organisms show tremendous variation in characteristics. Individuals from the same species, from the same population, show variation in characters. Exactly same as beetles in our example vary in their color. In these pictures, you can see some examples of extreme variation in nature. See how the same frog species and same beetle species show extreme variation in their colors. Before we go on to see how natural selection shapes evolutionary change, let's first define what is natural selection. We saw that living organisms show variation in their characteristics. Some of this variation is favorable for organisms' survival and reproduction than other variation. That is, some of this variation can increase chances of survival and reproduction than other variation. Such variation which increases chances of survival and reproduction is more likely to pass on to the next generation than less favorable variation. Now this is a process of natural selection, and let's see how natural selection shapes evolution with our beetle example. In our example of beetles, beetles vary in their color. Some beetles are green and some are brown in color. Remember that their color is heritable character. That is, it can pass from the parents to offspring. That is, green beetles give birth to green babies and brown beetles to brown babies. Now imagine that birds from the same habitat eat green beetles disproportionately more than brown beetles. Now, because birds are disproportionately eating more green than brown beetles, survival chances of brown beetles are more than green beetles. Now let's assume that both beetles reproduce with the same rate. That is, if green beetles give birth to on an average 4 babies, then brown beetles also produce on an average 4 babies. Reproductive rate being the same, and because brown beetles are more likely to survive, as a result, brown beetles will leave more babies behind and eventually their percentage will increase in population. If birds keep on eating more green beetles over many generations, then the entire beetle population will eventually possess only brown beetles, and as a result, green beetles will disappear from population. We selected this hypothetical example of beetles only for our better understanding about how natural selection shapes evolution. Scientists have worked out many real examples of natural selection from nature. For example, these colored spots on guppy fish evolve as a response to natural selection. Natural selection can shape many amazing adaptations. For example, this katydid insect from the picture have camouflage to exactly look like leaves. Or this non-poisonous king snake mimics the poisonous coral snake to bluff predators. These are some of the examples of natural selection from nature. I hope you have understood from this video what is natural selection and how it shapes evolutionary change. So if you like this video, then tune in to this channel to know more about evolution from upcoming videos.